The diplomatic shuttle cut through the teal-tinged skies of Alaris with a sleek, silent grace, a silver dart against a canvas of alien clouds. Inside the cockpit, Commander John Morton adjusted the high collar of his Federation dress uniform and suppressed the urge to sigh. The stiff fabric itched, the ceremonial pins dug into his shoulders, and the last time he'd worn this much shine, someone had tried to assassinate a dignitary with a poisoned fruit platter. Atmospheric conditions optimal, the pilot said crisply. Local time is mid-afternoon. Perfect. Just in time for alien tea and interstellar politics. As the shuttle descended toward the capital city of Valoria, its towers gleamed like crystalline spears stretching toward the twin suns. John caught a glimpse of vast, shimmering gardens, white gold bridges arching over bioluminescent rivers, and statues of long-forgotten warriors frozen mid-battle. All of it beautiful. All of it utterly foreign. He squared his shoulders as the landing ramp descended. Just a delivery job, he reminded himself. Say the words, offer the condolences, drop the proposal, get the hell back into orbit. No room for complications. Which was why the very first thing he noticed when he stepped into the sunlight was not a diplomatic flag or official welcoming committee, but her. Princess Thalia stood like living poetry beneath the arching spires of the landing pad. Her skin, the shade of living jade, shimmered with iridescent undertones, and her silver-white hair fell in elaborate braids that sparkled with delicate beads of soft light. But it was her eyes, luminescent, startlingly blue, and unflinchingly direct, that truly stopped him. That and the faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips, like she already knew something he didn't. "Commander Morton," she said, voice like a song remembered in dreams. "Welcome to Alaris. I trust your journey was uneventful." "Very. I only got mildly lost in your planetary orbit once," he replied dryly, bowing. "On behalf of the Federation Council, I extend our deepest condolences. Your father was deeply respected across the galaxy." A flicker crossed her features. Grief, maybe, or just exhaustion, hiding behind royal poise. "Thank you." "Come," she said, already turning. "We can speak more privately in the palace." The walk to the palace was lined with silent, stoic guards, all male, John noted. Thalia's gown was dark and elegant, accented with filaments of silver that gleamed subtly as she moved. Regal, yes, but efficient. Tactical, almost. He followed her into the grand hall, its vaulted ceiling etched with glowing constellations. "I must admit," she said, casting a glance over her shoulder, "I was surprised when the Federation sent a soldier instead of a bureaucrat." "Unusual times," John replied. "Sometimes they call for unusual uniforms." She gave a soft, amused huff. "Indeed." Then she changed direction without warning, pushing open a smaller, ornate door. "This was my father's study," she said, "but I didn't bring you here for tea." Before he could raise a brow, she pressed her hand to a panel hidden behind a carved relief. A segment of the wall shimmered, then receded, revealing a hidden passage that spiraled downward. "Care to see something few outsiders have ever witnessed?" she asked. "You do know how to keep a meeting interesting," John said, following. The staircase led to a vast underground chamber, pulsing with a gentle blue glow. Strange relics filled crystalline cases, weapons, tools, floating orbs of coded light. In the center stood a suit of armor, tall, humanoid, ancient, and unlike anything John had seen in all his tours of duty. It looked waiting. "No one's been able to activate it for centuries," Thalia said lightly. "Legend says it chooses its wearer. You believe that?" "I believe in entertaining guests," she smirked. "Try it on, for laughs." He chuckled, stepping up to it. Sure, what's the worst that could? The moment his fingertips brushed the breastplate, the chamber erupted with energy. Glowing patterns raced across the surface, ancient sigils flaring to life. The armor disassembled in midair, pieces hovering like predatory birds, then shot toward him. John gasped as they attached themselves seamlessly to his body. No weight, no resistance, just warmth and a sense of power waking from a long slumber. Across the chamber, Thalia stood frozen. Impossible, she whispered. John's voice emerged, layered with something deeper, something alien. Princess, what's happening to me? The moment the armor sealed itself around him, Commander John Morton felt like a lightning rod jammed into a supernova. The world warped. Time bent. Stars he'd never seen blinked behind his eyes. Weapon schematics, alien languages, ancient star charts. Knowledge poured into his mind like a dam collapsing. He staggered. Somewhere beyond the roaring data storm in his head, he heard Thalia shout his name. John. She rushed forward, her movements hesitant, as if approaching a wild animal, or a divine relic that might vaporize her if it twitched. Her gaze locked on him. The armor, it responded to you. Understatement of the century, he managed, voice modulated by a subtle harmonic hum. It sounded like himself, and someone else layered on top. Someone very old, and very ready for war. She sprinted toward the concealed passage they'd entered through. John followed. No, glided. The armor moved like it knew the terrain better than he did, anticipating his balance, softening every footfall, adjusting airflow, calculating enemy vectors. It was like wearing sentient instinct. They emerged into chaos. The palace staff and guard were mobilizing. Drones swarmed the outer walls. Outside the wide crystal windows, ships shaped like barbed shadows tore through the clouds, releasing writhing forms that plunged toward the surface like a plague. Voyaborn. John's briefing hadn't mentioned anything about them. Not one word. Either the Federation didn't know, or they didn't want him to know. Your Federation didn't warn you about the Void? Thalia asked, as if reading his thoughts. She grabbed his arm. He barely felt it through the armor, but the neural interface flared with a comforting pulse. No, John said flatly. All they told me was that your father died, your planet was strategically important, and I was to offer military condolences and a handshake. Thalia's jaw tightened. Of course, the Federation always plays chess while the rest of us are bleeding on the board. Then we're rewriting the rules, John said, turning to the viewport. Tell me what we're dealing with. Energy parasites, she said grimly. Creatures that slip between dimensions. They feed on life. Especially concentrated sources like cities, ecosystems, people. They're drawn to energy like moths to flame. John felt the armor shift around him, a quiet acknowledgement of ancient memories aligning with her words. The Voidborn weren't just enemies. They were the enemy, the reason this armor existed. I need to see the battlefield. Thalia led him to a side chamber, some kind of command nexus. Screens lit up the room with tactical feeds from around the capital. The once beautiful spires of Valoria were under siege. Shadow things poured through the streets, devouring light, draining color. Where they touched, stone blackened, metal rusted. Plant life curled inward like it was screaming. John's breath caught, not from fear, from recognition. The armor knows them, he whispered. It was made for this. He turned to Thalia. Her gaze was fixed on him, eyes wide with something between awe and terror. There's more, she said. The prophecy. Another one? She nodded slowly. An outsider. Not from our blood, but of it, who would awaken the Guardian, our last defense, in our world's darkest hour. John frowned. You thought it'd be another errand? We always did. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We never considered it might be you. Another explosion rocked the structure. Somewhere, people screamed. John moved instinctively, and the armor fed him routes, defenses, energy modulation patterns. His fingertips tingled with latent power. He looked back at Thalia. We don't have time for prophecies, he said. You have civilians to protect. I have monsters to vaporize. Let's go. But she stepped in front of him, hand on his chest. The neural interface flared again. You don't understand, she said. The armor feeds on energy, your life energy. It will kill you if you use it carelessly. John hesitated, then gave a crooked smile. Good thing I've never been careless in my life. You're not funny. You laughed earlier. That was pity. Another quake. Thalia, I'll figure this out. But right now, I need to help your people. She stared at him a beat longer, then nodded. There's a faster route to the surface. Come on. She pressed her hand to a shimmering panel. A wall dissolved, revealing a transport tube. They stepped in. The platform rocketed upward, past layers of glowing crystal, ancient architecture, and hidden conduits pulsing with the same energy John now carried in his bloodstream. The platform slowed. I've got one more question, John said. Yes? You said the armor feeds on life energy. She nodded. Are there other ways to replenish that, besides, dying? A smirk touched her lips, even now. Oh yes, Commander, but we'll need privacy for that lesson. The doors opened before he could formulate a witty reply. Valoria was burning, but John Morton had arrived, glowing, armed, ready, and the Guardian had awakened. The world was ending, but somehow it still smelled like jasmine. John lay sprawled across the altar, in the sacred temple hidden beneath the ruins of Valoria's East Quarter, his chest rising and falling in labored gasps. The Guardian armor, once a marvel of elegant alien design, now felt like a sarcophagus wrapped around his soul. Energy reserves depleted, neural strain reaching critical. The suit's HUD had started flickering red warnings some time ago, and now even the lights inside his own eyelids stung. But despite the crush of exhaustion, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Thalia moved through the chamber like a high priestess of old, lighting the ceremonial flames embedded in the walls. Her movements were deliberate, reverent, a far cry from the playful princess who had once dared him to try on a dusty relic just for amusement. She was something more now, sovereign, solemn, a woman with the fate of her people coiled around her like a second skin. We're out of time, John said hoarsely. The armor, it's draining me faster than I can regenerate. I can't keep this up. You're not meant to do it alone. She knelt beside him, the cool touch of her fingers brushing his burning skin where the armor had partially retracted. That's why the bond was created. He blinked. The ritual? Yes, she said, voice low and firm. We complete it now. For one surreal moment, he thought she meant another tactical download. Maybe a memory upload or an energy transfusion. But then she began to unfasten the silver inlays of her robes, revealing skin that shimmered with bioluminescent pulses, glowing gently at the intersections of her collarbone and heart. John's breath caught, not from lust, though that was certainly present, but from understanding. This wasn't about pleasure. It wasn't even about survival. It was about transformation. I thought that was just myth, he whispered. Everything's a myth until someone survives it, Thalia replied, brushing her palm against one of the exposed nodes glowing on John's armor-clad chest. This temple sits atop the oldest energy nexus on Alaris. Our ancestors built it for the ritual, for moments exactly like this. And what exactly? John asked. though his voice had already thickened. "Does the ritual involve?" She leaned close, her breath warm against his ear. "You open yourself. I channel life energy through the Guardian, and together we give it purpose again. And if it's not enough, then we die very, very impressively," she said, and kissed him. The connection was instant. Where her skin met the armor's nodes, arcs of energy surged, not violent, but exquisite. The armor retracted around her contact points like it recognized her, welcomed her. John's eyes flew wide as his entire nervous system lit up like a supernova. Time fell away. Language became irrelevant. There was only the rhythm of her breath syncing with his, the current of memory and meaning flowing between them, amplifying, expanding. He saw her childhood memories, chasing fire beetles through palace gardens, her father teaching her to meditate with an orb of starstone, her grief when he died. She saw him training on asteroid bases, drinking bad coffee on moon stations, holding a dying squad mate in his arms. All of it exchanged in flashes of raw emotion and neural fire. The armor drank it in. Lines of blue-white energy ignited across John's suit, glowing brighter with each passing second. The sacred chamber pulsed in harmony, ancient runes flaring to life on the walls. The air thickened with power, and John's fatigue evaporated as if burned away by light itself. The armor had changed again. It no longer simply fit him. It had merged with him. Where once it had been rigid and ornate, now it flowed like liquid metal, reactive and alive. At the center of the chest plate, just over his heart, a glowing blue crystal fragment had embedded itself, part of the heart of Alaris, resonating with their bond. Thalia opened her eyes slowly. They glowed, not with sorrow or royal burden, but with radiant awe. "You've become something new." "Not just me," John said, voice laced with something deeper, something older. "We." A siren screamed from above, an old one, deep and guttural, the kind used only when hope was bleeding out. Thalia stood, refastening the ceremonial accents to her robe with quiet elegance. That was the emergency beacon for the royal district. The Void Lord is attacking the palace directly. And the heart? If it falls into Voidborn hands, it'll be corrupted beyond saving. They'll use it to tear open a rift wide enough to pull in their entire swarm. John rose with her, his body thrumming with newfound strength. The armor pulsed in rhythm with his breath, and Thalia's presence behind him fed it like a second heartbeat. "Then we stop it. We go together," she said. "No objections here," he said, smirking as the helmet sealed around his head. Outside, the city was in ruins. Buildings collapsed into ash. Civilians ran in terrified clusters, some carrying injured, others screaming for missing family. Overhead, the sky churned black with Void-Orn dropships. As they ran through the war-torn streets, Thalia and John moved like twin blurs of light and fury. She fired with graceful precision, wielding an Alarian energy bow that hummed with each shot. John unleashed calculated bursts from his gauntlets, reducing Voidborn to puddles of melting shadow. But with every fight, they drew attention. The Void Lord noticed. It spoke to John through the neural interface, a cold whisper slithering across the circuits of his mind. "You are not enough. You are flesh pretending at divinity. Join me, or be consumed." John growled. "You'll have to get in line." Thalia clutched his arm. "It knows about the heart." "I know," he said. "We need to get to the palace before it unlocks it." But just then they heard it. A scream. A group of children and elders cornered in a market square by Voidborn drones. Thalia turned to him, torn. "The heart." "I know," John said. But, I know, he repeated, then darted toward the civilians. In the end, it wasn't a choice. It never was, because he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the guardian, and guardians protect. John stood at the gates of the ruined palace, fire flickering across his armor's newly reforged plating. Behind him, the city of Valoria burned, and ahead of him, darkness waited. Not metaphorical darkness, actual darkness. Tendrils of shadow squirmed across the once sacred stones, coiling like serpents, pulsing with unnatural hunger. The Void Lord's presence bled into the world like a psychic wound. It wasn't just a creature, it was a scar in reality, a thing that should never have existed, but had clawed its way into being anyway. And now it had the heart. The throne room's breached, Thalia whispered beside him. Her voice was tight, clipped, not with fear, but with a cold, simmering rage that made John's pulse match the hum of the Guardian. The heart lies beneath the dais. My father never found it, but the Void Lord did. John nodded, because it was never hidden. What do you mean? It was waiting, he said, eyes glowing blue beneath the helmet. For this moment, for us. They entered. The throne room had become a grotesque cathedral of corruption, where once there were columns of crystal and banners of starlight silk, now there were towers of shadow and writhing organic growths pulsing like veins across the floor and ceiling. In the center, hovering just above the fractured dais, was the Void Lord. Its body was vaguely humanoid, just enough to make it unsettling, but stretched tall and thin like a silhouette reflected in broken glass. Its face was a swirling vortex of darkness, ringed with what might have once been a crown, now cracked and bleeding void light. Beneath it, anchored in a cradle of twisted obsidian, glowed the heart of Alaris, but it no longer pulsed blue. It was purple now. Sick. Sick with the void. You are late, Guardian, the Void Lord said, its voice like glaciers cracking and temples collapsing. But then again, you always were. Nice to see you too, John replied, stepping forward. The Guardian armor responded to his resolve. His gauntlets surged with power, veins of light pulsing from the crystal embedded in his chest. Did you really believe this was chance? The creature hissed. You, a speck of mortality, stumbling into a relic of my enemies? No, you were guided. The armor called to you because you are a beacon, a fracture. Or maybe I was just the right man in the wrong uniform, John said, and now I'm here to fix your mistake. You cannot stop what has already begun. The heart is mine. With it I will tear a path through dimensions. Your federation will burn. Earth will bleed, and Alaris will become the first in my eternal empire of shadow. Thalia raised her weapon. You talk too much, and then the world exploded. They moved together like twin storms. John, a comet of righteous fury. Thalia, a blade of light in a whirlwind of death. The Void Lord struck with gravity itself, warping space around them. John threw up a shield just as a blast of compressed entropy shattered the dais beside him. Tactical suggestion, John muttered through the HUD. Don't get hit. Helpful, Thalia grunted, vaulting over a rising tendril and landing a shot directly into the creature's torso. It absorbed the blow. Laughed. You fight well, consort, it said, but he is weakening. The heart resists him. John staggered. It was true. The closer he got, the more the heart throbbed with pain, sending feedback through the armor. It was rejecting the corruption, but it was also rejecting him. Thalia was at his side in an instant, one hand on his chest plate. You're not alone, she whispered. Remember the ritual. Use our bond. The armor pulsed. And then something happened. The light between them, the energy awakened in the temple, flared again. The crystal in John's chest responded not to his strength, but to hers. To them. "I need you to anchor me," he said. "Always," she replied. Together, they stepped forward, right into the maelstrom. The Void Lord screamed, tendrils flailing. "No, you cannot!" "We can," John said. The Guardian reached for the heart. The moment his fingers brushed the crystal, the void energy struck like a tidal wave. Pain lanced through every nerve, the armor buckling, the neural interface threatening to collapse. But Thalia grabbed his hand. Their bond ignited, and the heart remembered. Suddenly, John knew the armor hadn't been made for a soldier alone. It had been made for a pair. Warrior and sovereign. Bloodline and choice. One to wield, one to balance. Alone, it was powerful. Together, it was transcendent. Blue-white energy erupted from the Guardian, overwhelming the void corruption. The heart shimmered, flickering between purple and blue, then locking into a blinding, brilliant azure. The Void Lord shrieked, its body unraveling. "You were always an echo," John whispered. Stepping forward, hand now fused with the heart. "We're the real thing." The armor ignited, not with fire, but with purpose. Waves of cleansing energy pulsed outward from the heart, closing dimensional rifts, banishing Voidborn to the spaces between stars. The palace shook, not with collapse, but rebirth. Crystal reformed, shadow dissolved, and then, with one final cry, the Void Lord came undone. John fell to his knees, the armor smoldering. The crystal, now embedded in his chest, glowing with sea. Thalia dropped beside him, catching his shoulders. John, say something." He looked at her, smiled. "I really hate prophecy." She laughed, then kissed him, deep, fierce, grateful. Outside, the world began to heal. 3 months later, John stood beside Thalia on the balcony of the newly rebuilt palace. The city sparkled beneath twin suns, gardens blooming where ruin once reigned. The heart of Alaris had been resealed, guarded now not by forgotten stone, but by the living, by the Guardian, by him. The armor still pulsed beneath his skin. He could summon it with a thought, but it was no longer a burden. It was a bond. "Diplomatic envoy just left," Thalia said, joining him. "Your resignation was accepted. You're officially the first human ever to defect to Alaris." "Did they send flowers?" "Just an official apology and a new trade agreement. Apparently, saving the galaxy buys you a decent export contract." John grinned. "And the throne?" Thalia raised a brow. "You're not on the throne yet, Commander." "Then I'd better keep earning it." She kissed him again, softer this time. "You already have." And as the first stars twinkled into view, John took her hand, the Guardian now silent but ever watchful within him, because this wasn't just the end of a war, it was the beginning of a legend. In the centuries that followed, bards of both Earth and Alaris would sing songs of the Guardian and the Queen, the warrior who crossed the stars, and the royal who defied fate with love. But those who lived the truth of it, those who fought, bled, and rebuilt after the shadow, knew something deeper. The real power wasn't in the armor. It wasn't in ancient tech or forgotten prophecies or cosmic birthrights. It was in the choice to care. In a world torn by fear and conquest, a soldier chose to protect instead of obey. A princess chose truth over tradition. Together, they chose connection over protocol, over politics, over the easy path of indifference. And that choice, it didn't just save a world, it rewrote it. Because sometimes the greatest weapon against darkness isn't a beam of light, it's the hand that reaches for another and refuses to let go.